Money in politics is not the most important issue, but it is the first issue that must be addressed if we are to elect leaders for president and Congress throughout this land who can solve the other urgent problems facing our country. And so the question is simple. Will the next president, whom we will vote for on February 9th, and whom our country will elect next November, will the next president represent we the people, or will that president be beholden to the big money in politics? Today, we are issuing a challenge to New Hampshire voters and to all the presidential candidates with the unveiling of our We the People pledge to fight big money. We are calling on at least 10,000 New Hampshire voters to sign this pledge right here to my right, to demand that every presidential candidate and every person running for office in this land commit to supporting 6 core reforms that can loosen the stranglehold of big money over our democracy. We demand that the secret money flooding our elections is exposed and full transparency is required, number one. We demand that bribes from lobbyists and the revolving door be closed, that we end that system of pay to play, number two. We demand that super PACs go out of business and that we overturn the Citizens United Supreme Court ruling once and for all. We demand a new system of small donor-powered, citizen-funded elections to replace the big money dominating our democracy. Number four, we demand an end to gerrymandered districts where politicians pick the voters instead of the other way around, and a modernizing of our election system. And finally, we demand, because our rights as equal citizens are worthless if they are not enforced, we demand real enforcement of these reforms by a new federal election commission.
In a time where there's such division in this country, Republicans and Democrats can really agree on the time of day. But almost all of them agree that Citizens United was bad law and bad public policy. And for that we should be grateful. Change is necessary. Change is necessary. There was a time, and I've been in New Hampshire for more than 4 decades, when $100 made a difference, when $1,000 from a citizen was a huge contribution. We don't matter as much now as we used to. It ought to trouble every single American that 158 families, according to the New York Times, have contributed half the money that's been raised by both parties thus far in the presidential primaries. Think about that. That a fraction of 1% of the money in 2014 was given by people who are billionaires. My question is this: why would someone donate $100 million, dark, unaccountable money, to an independent group, a super PAC, unless they were buying something or believing they were buying something? I mean, you got to deal with that reality. They're not doing it for good government. They're doing it for their personal interests. And the other thing that should trouble us is what is it they think they're buying and who's selling it? Who's selling it? I agree with Dan Weeks, until this issue is addressed, either by a constitutional amendment, and while we're waiting for that, by transparency. We could have transparency tomorrow. We could have transparency tomorrow. The Congress of the United States could pass a law making all those contributions public. That's not a violation of anyone's free speech. It's interesting to me, by the way, as a lawyer and a judge for all these years, that corporations do not have rights against self-incrimination under the Fifth Amendment, but they have free speech rights under the First Amendment. That's troubling to me. It's troubling to me. The consequences of Citizens United may have been unintended, but they are very real. Members of Congress spend between 30 and 70% of their day raising money.
Yep.
Isn't that shocking to you? It's really shocking to me. And it's very appropriate that Dan Weeks and all of you have started this campaign in a big way in the state, in the first in the nation primary. Our voice is loud nationally, but it needs to get a lot louder. Because if we don't deal with it, if we don't deal with this problem, pretty soon it won't matter who's on the ballot. It won't matter. And we will be so distant from our government, fewer people will vote. Let me tell you the other crime that's being committed here, in my view. Most of the big money in politics, which doesn't come from us, comes from people with very special interests. And so we have false debates. We have candidates on the far left and candidates on the far right accepting money with a specific purpose. Try to run for public office and say, I'm going to compromise. I'm going to try to act in the public interest. I'm going to be bipartisan where possible. Try to raise money with that bumper sticker. You can't do it in American political life. This organization and this pledge is fundamentally important. Fundamentally important. So I applaud all of you. I applaud Dan Weeks, and we need to get about it. Thank you very much.
One of the things we don't think about when we talk about money in politics is what good people aren't running because of the money in politics. What good people don't want to spend 50 to 70% of their day calling people up and begging for money. What people don't want to have to raise $100 million to run for this, that, or the next thing, and what people just feel unclean doing it. And you don't know the answer to that question, although I've got some evidence because I've had some people that I've asked to run for office and they said, I can't do that stuff, and I won't do that stuff. In 1980, which to some of you seems like a long time ago, and to some of us seems like yesterday, we ran a campaign for a law partner of mine named Warren Rudman, who wanted to run for the Senate, and in February, he came down the hall and said to a bunch of people, let's start a campaign for the Senate. And we started by driving to Plymouth, New Hampshire, and had 4 people in a room, and the next year, he was elected to the United States Senate, having pledged to take no PAC money, and having pledged to do it for $300,000 or $400,000. And we did it. We mimeographed materials. We walked the streets. We did it citizen by citizen. We didn't have printouts that said, don't go to that house, they might be a Democrat. We didn't have a printout that said the poll says so-and-so is doing such and such. We just did it by saying to people, this is a good candidate, you ought to vote for him. That's not the way it is today. I read the paper last Sunday about the analysis of the presidential candidates and who had a chance and who didn't have a chance. And some of the finest, most experienced people in the race were given no chance. Why? Not because they didn't have ideas, not because they didn't have experience, not because of all the things we should be thinking about. It was because they hadn't raised as much money or they didn't have as big a personal bank account. That's just wrong. We know there's going to be money in politics. It takes money for politics. The problem is, as John said, where's the money coming from? What's the expectation? And unless it's transparent on what's going on, and unless there are limitations put on it, we're all in trouble. As you go to these campaign headquarters today, I'm going to go up to Concord and watch one of the candidates register for president just because I'm a junkie. But as you go to the campaign headquarters, ask them that question. I disagree that it's not the most important issue. It's the frame on the picture. It's the thing that surrounds the whole process. It is the question. And so what do they think? What do they think about it? They hate it, unless you're Trump, he's spending his own money, but they hate it. He probably hates spending his own money, but they're doing it, and they're not changing it. And what will they tell you they will do about it? And ask them specifically, will they support a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United? It's a very simple question. And if you get anything other than a one-word answer, they're obfuscating with you. So ask that question, You're doing a great job. Rebellion should be kept under control, but good luck. Thank you for being here.